evening, viewers. It's great to have you back tonight at 8 this Wednesday night. Finally, we are going to talk about how the Parliament decided to debate the state of economy. But the unfortunate part was that there were only a handful of members of Parliament who were present while this very, very important debate was taking place. What could be more important than debating the state of our economy at a time when we are facing such a significant slowdown, when we are facing such a significant jobs crisis? What could be more important for our MPs? Citizens are losing jobs. Production is down. Almost every sector is facing slowdown. So much so that just a basic check shows us that here at Mirana, we have raised the issue of slowdown and economic crisis at least 30 times in the last 1 year. But watch how serious our netas are about the state of economy. Empty benches. Opposition questioned the government over the slowdown. And here is what happened, an excerpt of the Parliament debate.
I'm quoting based on the sum and also the last year's performance of UPA 2 and NBA 1. The external debt to GDP at the period end, external debt to GDP ratio, which is a percentage ratio, at the end of UPA 2, that is 2009-14, 23.9% was the external debt to GDP ratio, which came down. External debt to GDP came down within 5 years from 23.9 to 19.7, sir. I would like to highlight this. External debt to GDP, that's the reduction. And therefore, when we are talking about macroeconomic data and government now facing a situation on which the general sphere of talk of some members said, oh, no, you don't understand economy. You just seem to be floating. I'm sorry. On every one of the points, sir, I will give you detailed, specific, performance-based data.
आर्थिक प्रगति ठहर सी गई है। देश की जीडीपी निरंतर गिरती जा रही है। कारखाने बंद हो रहे हैं, रोजगार टूट रहा है, मांग टूट रही है, बाजार टूट रहे हैं। लोगों के पास पैसा नहीं है आम जरूरत की और आवश्यक चीजें खरीदने के लिए। गांव में स्थिति और भी गंभीर है। देश का कृषि क्षेत्र गहरे संकट से गुजर रहा है और भारत का किसान त्राही कर रहा है। अमीर और गरीब के बीच में खाई बढ़ती जा रही है।
For the last 2 years, we've been flagging off why India's economy needs the attention, needs the government's urgent attention. Initially, the government dismissed our alarm, and they were in a constant denial mode. We got excuse after excuse. We were told by Nirmala Sitharaman, the finance minister, that the millennial mindset is a factor for the economic slowdown. Today, she actually came out and said that the changes in the BS4 emission norms was also a reason for the slowdown, obviously completely dismissing the fact that it has to do with something about consumption and whether people have the money to buy this. Then we had Ravi Shankar Prasad, who in October 2019 turned around and said, what slowdown are you talking about? This weekend, there were the movie releases that took place. 3 movies earned 120 crore. If there was a slowdown, why would people be watching movies? That was one of the denial excuses that was given to us. Mr. Suresh Angadi, Union Minister of State, he said, एयरपोर्ट्स फुल हैं, सीट नहीं मिलती, रेलवे की टिकट नहीं मिलती, तो स्लो डाउन कैसे हो सकता है if people are traveling so much and spending so much? And then, of course, we also had Sushil Kumar Modi, who said that this is just a cyclical yearly slowdown that happens during the Sawan Bhado month. Just a set of excuses that has been presented to us. Well, now that the government has admitted there is slowdown, there is also a second big aspect that we want to focus on. The government today also admitted that there are shortcomings in our data. In fact, the minister said government is aware of the shortcomings in the data collection. We are trying to upgrade it and we will be happy to have any inputs. That's what Rao Inderjeet Singh, Minister of State for Statistics and Program Implementation, said in a response to a question by Shashi Tharoor. So what does that mean? Does it mean that India's data, our growth rate data and employment data, our consumption data, our services sectors and labor sector surveys, none of it is credible? Where does that leave us, and how will the world ever believe what we say when it comes to our state of economy? Let's say good evening to Professor Arun Kumar, Chairman, Professor for Institute of Social Sciences, former professor and Chairman for the Center for Economic Studies and Planning at JNU. Mr. R. Gopalan, former Finance Secretary, Narendra Taneja, spokesperson, National Spokesperson for the BJP. Mr. Taneja, let me start with you, because this is interesting, and this is a response that has been given by a sitting minister who says that, yes, there is a problem with our data. So what do we believe and what do we not believe?
No, I mean, you have seen the statement, but that does mean that, you can't, there is any, credibility crisis or anything of that sort. There is absolutely nothing. But when it comes to data, there always, scientific method, technology is being employed, and which means that there is always a room to improve it even further. And that will continue. That seems to be the case across the world, because you have now better technology, better methods and better practices available. So and you keep on improving. That's what the reference is to. Ask anybody in the world, western part of the world or eastern part of the world, Indian data are considered among the most credible data in the world. So I don't think people outside the world, even in western parts of the world, where they look at these things with a microscope, they are questioning Indian data. They do about China, but India, nobody questions Indian data except a few people in our own country.
No, but I don't need anybody else to question the data when my own government and minister is admitting it, that there is a problem with the data. When my own government is telling me we can't give you the employment data because there's a problem with it. When my own government is telling me we can't give you the consumption pattern and consumption expenditure survey data because there is a problem with it. When my own government is admitting that we can't give you the data on services sector because the companies that we surveyed are not functional or are categorized wrong. So I don't need outsiders to tell me that. I am simply now quoting what you are telling me, Mr. Taneja.
Listen, no. I got your question. I got your question. I got your question very well. You see, the point is that there are many areas. We are a very vast country, and we got into power only just 5.5 years ago. I mean, before that, we only have started now putting in place kind of systems so that we have got actually data, if possible, even real-time data, most of the things. I mean, yes, some system, but they were not the kind of system that, for instance, in your questions, I can see you expect. So we are building that kind of network. And in time to come, we probably will have access to that kind of data if possible. A target would be on real-time basis wherever possible. But that does mean there are problems. I mean, there will always be challenges. There are always new technologies which you need to employ. That's what the minister is referring to. It does mean that we don't have data on anything, but there are many, like employment. So, I mean, there are many companies where people are employed, but no data is available because those data are not filed anywhere. And there are many people, especially when it comes to small,
If I ask you, what is the rate of unemployment in our country? If I ask you, what is the rate of unemployment in our country? How many people are unemployed in urban or rural? In casual or organized sector, will you have an answer for me? If I ask you if the consumption in our country is at a 40-year low, will you have an answer for me whether that's true or not? If I ask you whether we are growing at 5% or 8%, can you actually tell me that?
Yes, I will have the answer. I will have the answer. No, I can answer these questions. Very easy to answer. The point is that, as I said, employment data. I mean, we don't have exact data. Nobody has. For instance, how many people you have got employed working at your home? Who is collecting data on them? Who has got the data? How many people working in my company? No companies come to me to collect those data. And there's so many such examples. So the point is, yes, we have some data, but at the same time, we are trying to put systems in place that we have better data when it comes to. But otherwise, the simple formula is that you have to basically, you have to go by the fact that you can see the social atmosphere in the country. You can see the overall economic atmosphere in the country. We find we have done some fantastic fundamental work. We are we're working on strengthening the foundation, bringing about structural changes. 67% people, by the way, have patience. Now I know you want a patience on that. 67% people before 2014 did a bank account. Did you ever question that? 67% people did a bank account. They were kept out of the banking system. That apartheid was practiced. Not a single media entity, including your channel, ever questioned that.
We didn't
That
exist.
was the data
We
I'm
didn't
sharing
exist
with you.
before 2014, Mr.
67%
Taneja.
India, we have brought
My
every
channel
single
didn't
entity.
exist before 2014,
Listen,
Mr. Taneja.
No, I
No,
mean, I'm
before
not
you
writing
decide to
you.
attack me and my channel for how biased or unbiased we are,
Your sister
please know the
channel was there.
facts.
You know, I'm not attacking. I mean, you want to have a, or you like that kind of debate. I'm not going to fall into your trap. I'm not attacking you. You are not important for me. I don't attack anybody. That's not the way I
You're
debate.
stating the fact.
So
you
please
asked
don't
me a
use the word
question.
attack.
Why
If you
did
want
you
to have that
debate
kind of
this
debate, allow me to
before
leave.
we
I
came
don't
to power? I'm
participate in
telling
such.
you this channel didn't exist.
Where is the attack?
And doesn't matter whether you
Madam,
think
listen
I am
to me.
important or
Madam,
not.
listen to
People
me.
are.
When I
People
say
want
you,
answers
I
from you,
mean the
Mr.
media.
Taneja.
Listen to me. I know that you have been elected by 1.3 billion people to be the sole ambassador and argue with, I know that that's how you position your channel for TRP. But let's not get into that. The point here is that when I say you, I don't mean you, the channel. I mean the media. To 67% Indian didn't have the bank account. Now every single Indian has bank account. Majority of our villages didn't have access to electricity. Today every single village has been connected. Do you mean that's not an economic activity? 80% of the bank accounts are operational, functional, doing well, active. You mean that's not economic activity? The people, every single village is now being connected with road. You think that's not an economic activity? We are strengthening things at the level of, at the bottom, at the level of, the foundation. That's why, these are all economic activities, and all these are going to add massively in our GDP in months and years and decades to come. That's how we look at it. We are here to serve the people, to take fruits of the economic development, not only to affluent people in South Delhi and South Bombay, but to everyone across the country. That's why some people living in South Bombay, South Delhi, they are very upset with us.
Okay.
Because they're not, because we are doing what we are doing to strengthen the foundation and taking economy.
Okay, let me get a quick response.
Every single
All right.
household across the country. But that does mean that our GDP
let's
is not
make the
going
people
up.
of South Bombay the villains for this. But to your questions, because you asked those questions, of course it is credible if you've managed to open so many bank accounts for people.
I myself live in South Delhi.
Of course it is credible.
Don't play with these words.
If more people are getting electricity connections today, of course it is credible. If road connection has improved, of course it is credible. If our country has become open defecation free or 95% villages have toilets, but it becomes a little difficult to accept these claims when your own NSO comes out and says only 71% of the rural households actually have toilets in their own. And it doesn't matter if people have bank accounts or electricity connections if they don't have money to pay electricity bills or money to put in their bank accounts. But let me bring in our other two panelists. Professor Arun Kumar, the big debate is where the government itself is saying that the data, there is a problem with the data collection. Then how do we believe any of the information that we have? Does this validate the whole question that's being raised even about India's growth?
So, data will always have some deficiencies, because after all, we collect through a wide variety of methods. In the economy, there are three main sectors called the primary, secondary, and tertiary. These are further broken down into 9 sectors. Then you have the public sector, private sector, and the organized and the unorganized. So you need 27 different methods to estimate what the GDP is. And the GDP is one number which tells you how well the people are doing, because when you divide by the population, you get the per capita income. And there'll be always problems in the 27 different methods that you have to estimate. But the point is, when you compare the past to the present with all the deficiencies that were there earlier and that they're there, you compare them and you say what is happening. And when you look at the macroeconomic situation, the rate of growth of the economy is declining. And not only has it been declining, I would say since demonetization, it's a negative because the unorganized sector has declined and the unorganized sector data comes once in 5 years, and in between it is assumed that the unorganized sector is growing at the same rate as the organized sector. Now that was true before demonetization when the ratios were not changing, but the ratios started changing after demonetization, and therefore the unorganized sector started declining. GST then hit again and the NBFC crisis hit again. So last 3 years, my argument is that the rate of growth of the economy is less than 1% and mostly it's been negative. So it's not just a slowdown from 8% to 5% or 4.5% now, but it's actually a recession that we are in. And that's the reason why, if it was 5% rate of growth, why is consumption declining and the investment rate stagnant or declining? Where is the rate of growth going? If the growth is taking place, consumption should rise, investment rate should rise, or at least one of them should be rising. Both of them falling or stagnant implies that the rate of growth is not 5% or 4.5%, but it's negative. That's what it's consistent with. Then you see the stress that is there all around in the economy. Employment is going down. Now we may have questions about the employment data, but what we have is comparable to the earlier data. And that comparability means that as compared to earlier, the employment situation is bad. The last labor force survey showed that roughly 45 million people had dropped out of the workforce, in the economy, and especially women. The women's situation declined dramatically, and those who are educated, the young people in the age group of 15 to 29 educated, they had lost a lot of jobs.
Correct.
Then the All India Manufacturers Organization showed that in comparison between 2014 and 2018, again there was a sharp drop in the employment, sharp drop in the output, especially in the unorganized sector. There are many other surveys also which point to the same thing. So in other words, the crisis began with the unorganized sector and has gone into the organized sector as well.
Yes.
So organized sector, which was benefiting initially, is also losing out, and that's why the rate of growth is going down. The 5% or 4.5% rate of growth is only the rate of growth of the organized sector. It doesn't represent the unorganized sector. So that's why the crisis is quite deep in the economy. And whatever data there is available, we have been having methodological changes that have been taking place every 5 or 10 years in various things. Now we can change the methodology again if there's a problem. But after the data comes, we can't say that there's a methodological problem, therefore we will not accept the data.
But there is,
have to accept the data as it
Professor
is, otherwise
Arun
we cannot
Kumar,
have a discussion.
Yes.
Your data is something and my data is something. So
yes, and there are now reports that suggest that there could be another round of revision, which is fine as long as you tell us that this is some data that we can take seriously and this is the credible data. Now, I just want to point this out. In June 2019, Mr. Gopalan, in June 2019, former Chief Economic Advisor of India, Arvind Virmani, who worked with this very government, wrote in a paper that there was a problem with the GDP expansion data between 2011 and 2017, and he said we had overestimated. Rather than growing at about 7% a year in that period, the growth was actually 4.5%. That's essentially, and if it was 4.5% now, it's obviously then much lower what we're looking at now. Do you believe there is a genuine problem that what we see around us doesn't reflect in the numbers that we are looking at?
Well, in a sense, let us look at the data we have got recently. Let us look at certain indicators. Now, we find electricity consumption has gone down significantly. Rural wages and rural employment has gone down significantly. Then factory production has gone down. Diesel consumption has gone down. Tax collections have gone down. Now, if you look at all this, they all show that there is a certain amount of economic slowdown. I may not go to the extent of calling it a recession, because until data is proved, I'm not going to say that there's a recession, which Professor Arun Kumar has solid reasons to talk about. I have not seen the data, and therefore I won't be in a position to talk about that. But look at the other areas in which there are stresses in the economy. The banking system is still having the stress. NBFC sector is still having the stress. The manufacturing and other companies also having the stress, because the deleveraging in those cases have not really occurred. So, if you look at all these things, one gets the impression that economy is slowing down, and it is reflected in those factors which I have just mentioned. Now, if you say about Arvind Virmani's paper,
Yes.
well, there are different views prevailing within the economist community. and therefore I would think that that calls for a separate debate, not at this point where you are looking at certain other issues.
Okay, so now let me just, ask you this question then, Mr. Gopalan. Slowdown, intense slowdown, or recession. All of this can actually be analyzed in a simpler manner, provided we have credible data that's available. But if there is a jobs report that gets delayed by 6 months and then is released in a complicated manner, if there is a consumer expenditure report that will give us an understanding of whether people are spending money or not, that gets junked and doesn't get released at all, then how will we ever decide whether what the state of economy is? Are there other ways?
Well, there's one more issue which has not been seen the light of the day, which is an unorganized sector survey, which used to get done every 5 years. That report has not yet been released, in addition to what the two other things you have reported. Now, as Professor Arun Kumar says, there are always, every survey, every 5 year, every 10 year, the methodology gets improved thanks on account of the various, structural changes that take place in the companies, as well as the technological advances available for us to get those data captured. So, in a sense that this has always been happening, that there has always been a change of methodology as we go along. But the point remains that the data which comes as a result of the existent methodology, if that data is not made available for public to have a discourse on, obviously one gets worried. We may say that the data is incomplete, data is not accurate. As Professor Kumar says, data is not going to be accurate for any time to come in the future. It's not going to be that easy, because the complexity of the institutions, complexity of industries just undergo a change. The economy undergoes a complexity, undergoes a change. The technological advances undergo a change. We always will be running after trying to get the methodology correct, improve the methodology as we go along. So I have a feeling that until that happens, we need to accept whatever data is thrown by the existing methodology, and then start our discourse on.
Correct.
I would stop at this point in time.
Okay, correct. But we are not even using that what is available with us. We are junking what is available with us, which is why this debate gets even more complicated. But let me ask Mr. Taneja. Mr. Taneja, Professor Arun Kumar believes we are in a recession, which is negative growth. I believe there is, of course, intense slowdown that we are witnessing, but I'm no economic expert. So let me ask you this question. What is your view? How is our economy doing?
Good question. You see the point. There's no denying we are an emerging economy. We are not a developed economy. There are challenges. And there will be challenges for like next 25, 30 years, because we are in an emerging economy. At the same time, challenges are quite unique in the terms population is still growing, and the northern part of India is not probably moving as fast as the peninsular India, and there are lots of other challenges. So there are challenges. There are challenges everywhere in the country, because we are an emerging economy, and that includes economy. Nobody can deny that we are not facing challenges. We have always faced challenges since 47. And there are challenges even today, especially now when the global economy as a whole is kind of going southward. So the challenges for an economy like us are going to get even more aggressive. So those are there. But for Professor Arun Kumar's basic conclusion is based on that there are no data for he himself is saying for unorganized sector. And unorganized sector is pretty much very large, the biggest footprint we have in the country. So he's basis on that he's basically suggesting that we are already in the minus. So the growth is, which is not true. The point is that, that's his assumption. So that can be just probably he's saying it for his own consumption. But these things need to be said only based on certain data, on certain science. You can't just reach to your own conclusion and say just because, okay, this is what I have concluded. But that's not how it works. But as I said, as the minister has also made it clear on the floor of parliament, that that's for our economy. Yes, there are challenges, but we will be back on 6.7% or 6.8% very soon. I mean, there are people who trust Economist, a very reputed publication, and they, in the latest issue, they have actually come out that India is among the top 10 growers in the world. And when you look at the new large economy, India is the only country mentioned there. And according to them, if you think they know a little bit about economics, they are saying in 2020 we will be back to 6.7% GDP growth. And it's not that they don't know the internal matters or what's happening within the countries and all that. They do. So if you don't trust me, just pick up the copy of The Economist. And there are several other organizations. The point here that I'm saying, yes, there are challenges and we are addressing them. We are working 24/7. Every single area where the economy is facing challenge, we know that. We have identified the problem, we have analyzed it, and we are already working on that. From A to Z, that's precisely what we are trying to do. But at the same time, as I said, we are also focusing at the same time, wherever there are big challenges, I don't want to use the word like cancer cells, but we have attacked them. We are fixing them. We are not doing anything which is just cosmetic. We are addressing those issues which are fundamental, which are structural. So when you do that, I'll give you two examples quickly. One is we have decided to go for Bharat Standard 6 category of fuel, that is Euro 6. It's a massive change, massive change. Which means the auto sector they had to go back to the drawing board and rework their strategy, rework their technology, rework even their factory. That's happening. So this transition from fossil fuels to electric mobility, we are also working with that. In the process, sometime things slow down a little bit. It happens. But we are doing it for the larger interest of the economy.
Okay.
Larger
now,
interest
I will take this point because this is also
at the
what...
end of the day, for us, the most important is
I will take up this point, Mr. Taneja, because this is also what the finance minister said in the parliament. And unfortunately, and I'm emphasizing on this point enough, the politicians, the political parties, our members of parliament are not getting the gravity of the situation right now. It was disappointing. It was very, very disappointing and depressing to see the attendance in the House when such a crucial topic was being debated. In fact, at one point, even those who are part of this debate had completely lost interest, and cutting across party lines. It's as if the parties think that they can send their one representative who will stand there and make comments and raise their questions. And look at that. And it's across the Rajya Sabha. Not just the opposition, not just the government.
I share your sentiments. Absolutely. I share your sentiments on that. They should have been there. They should have been there and debating. After all, they represent the people. So I share your sentiments.
Why weren't they there? Why weren't your party representatives there, Mr. Taneja?
Well, let me answer it. Very good question. And I think it seems that a lot of people think, including those belonging to whether our party, other party, those members of parliament, they say, oh, you're discussing economy. It's a technical thing. Is does really something that I understand or something that interests me. They think it's technical. It's not. Economy is something that actually affects every single person. You may not have been a student of economics, does matter, but it affects you. So therefore, just by saying it's technical, I don't need to sit in Parliament House, that's wrong. I think if you have been elected to sit in the Parliament House, whether upper house or the lower house, you actually must pay attention, because economy is the most important thing when it comes to your voters, when it comes to the ordinary people. So I fully share.
Well, I'm sure one word from Prime Minister Modi or Mr. Amit Shah, and all of them will turn up in the upper house or the lower house, wherever it has to be done. The due importance has to be given to this issue. Let's come back to the core issue at hand, and let's also say good evening to Dr. Arvind Virmani. Good evening. Thank you so much, Dr. Virmani, for joining us. Let me first begin by getting your view onto what government has said today. The government admits that there is a problem with data collection, and that they are trying to upgrade the system. They're open for all kinds of inputs. What does that mean, Dr. Virmani? If we don't have credible data, how will we formulate our policies?
Well, it all depends on what data is being talked about. I have no idea about what was the debate or what you've been talking about. But what I can tell you is my experience of 30, 40 years in government, or it started 40 years ago. We have observed for the last, in fact, 15 years I was in government till 2009. that the gap between the NSS consumption data which came up and the GDP data consumption from the GDP estimate was widening over time. This is not a new thing. It started something like, as I said, 15 years, so that would be about 1995 or earlier. And so this issue of sample surveys has always been on the table. I really haven't interacted directly with the people who do the surveys or the way it's done since I left the government, so I cannot say if the thing has worsened or improved or it is just on that trend. But there has always been an NSS issue. Secondly, from what I did try and study the 2017-18 NSS surveys, and one of the issues which has come up that the ratios may be largely correct, but when you amplify it to get absolute numbers, it's based on population estimate projections of the Registrar of India, which were made 5 or 10 years ago, which have proved to be completely wrong in terms of the latest estimates made by the UN organization for all countries, including India.
But Dr. Virmani, you say there's always been a problem, and largely all experts tell us because India is so huge, there are so many factors that have to be included. There will always be some discrepancies and mismatch that happens. But what do we do when that data is held back, when no data is made available to you? And since you asked that specific question, what was asked of the government today in the parliament was by Shashi Tharoor, who said there is much debate about India's growth and India's GDP data and the data that's available, whether it's credible or not, and the response by the government was on that. But I will go on to even say, like you pointed out, the NSO employment data was held back for 6 months. The NSO consumer expenditure data has been held back, junked essentially, and the government says they will work on a new system and maybe 3 years later come out with another survey. The NSO's, the services sector survey that came out was also questioned, and the government said we will have to look into it. So now it's at multiple accounts. But is it then justified to not give us any information at all?
So first, you mentioned GDP. I do not agree with the critics on GDP because the new GDP base has been built by that whole organization, National Statistical Organization, which did the rebasing, the advisory committees. All those were appointed before the new government came in 2014. So those committees were not changed. They all did that work. And to the extent I've studied it, and again, this is an issue which is close to my heart, and I have taken the trouble to study it. I do not agree with those critics who say that the entire GDP series from 2011 is bunkum. Please do not confuse that with the back series.
Yes.
There are no accepted or standard methods of calculating the back series, and there can be disagreement in that. And again, I'm not pronouncing on that because there is no standard method. But as far as the GDP series is concerned, I think the critics are just arbitrary. There is no basis. I've heard the critics. I've heard their actual specific things. I've heard the answers. So I don't agree with that. That the whole GDP new series is wrong.
Okay, if I may just ask Professor Arun Kumar, because just before you joined us, Dr. Virmani, we were having this conversation, and Professor Arun Kumar believes that what we are being given as the GDP rate is not the actual data, that we are in a recessionary mode. Professor Kumar, would you like to respond?
Yeah, so the unorganized sector in the new series is measured by measuring the organized sector and assuming more or less that the unorganized sector is growing at the same rate as the organized sector. Now that was true before the demonetization, But after demonetization, the unorganized sector is unambiguously declining. And you have data from Punjab, Haryana, Delhi Chamber of Commerce and Industries, All India Manufacturers Organization. You have the data from SBI at the time of demonetization. You had the RBI data on consumer durables from the RBI also. So you have large amount of data showing that the unorganized sector is declining after the demonetization, and then the GST hit them, and then the NBFC crisis. So my argument is that the unorganized sector has to be measured separately. It cannot be assumed that the organized sector can represent the unorganized sector. So my argument is that because the unorganized sector, whatever data is available, alternate data, you have to use that. And that's why you find that the MGNREGS has increased dramatically in the post-demonetization period, because people went back from urban areas to rural areas. They didn't have jobs here, and there they demanded the work under the MGNREGS work. And then the RBI said 2 years back that only 45 days of work was being given rather than 100 days of work. So in fact, the allocation of 60,000 crores was inadequate for generating enough jobs. Then your workforce participation data shows a decline of 45 million people from the workforce in the period of the last 7 years. All India Manufacturers Organization shows. So all the data suggests that we cannot use organized sector as a proxy for the unorganized sector. The second problem came that the MCA 21 database, which was used for the private corporate sector in the new series, that has shown a lot of problem. 36% of those companies are found to be out of survey companies. So in other words, the database itself has a problem, and you allow for a blowing up factor for the out of survey companies. But if the out of survey companies are not traceable, etc., then how do you use the blowing up factor to find out the organized sector's contribution to the private sector? So in other words, even the private sector contribution to the organized sector, that's a problem under the new series. So there are several kinds of problems which I've been writing about and I've been pointing out, and therefore we have to change the methodology. Now, when we look at alternate data, my argument is that the unorganized sector is declining at about 10% per annum for the last 3 years. And that's why the rate of growth of the economy is now less than 1%, and now it's turned negative, when the rate of growth has fallen from 8% to roughly about 4.5% now. So the economy is in recession, and that is consistent with the fact that the index of industrial production is declining, the core sector is declining, that's the credit offtake is declining. All those are pointing to the fact that the economy is really in decline. It's not really growing anymore. So the other supplementary data, that's coming out, as Mr. Gopalan was pointing out, that is a problem. Then the government says that, the international agencies are saying that the rate of growth will be 6%. But international agencies are not the data collecting bodies. They simply take the government's data and then they make some adjustment to it. But essentially, the international agencies like ADB, IMF, etc., are only taking the government data and recycling that. So if the government data is wrong, then the international agencies' data is also incorrect. Then the question of the auto industry, yes, there are, BS6, etc., but why the tractor sales falling?
Correct.
Why are the two-wheeler sales falling, That shows that the entry-level vehicles are declining, commercial vehicles are declining, and then the freight traffic is declining, the railway freight is declining. So large number of factors are showing that actually instead of growing, there's a decline. And that's why the rate of growth is probably negative at the moment.
Okay, so before I get Dr. Virmani to respond on the other issues that you raised, Narendra Taneja, can we really say that it's because emission norms have been changed that the auto sales declined? What about tractors and two-wheelers and the other, the entry-level cars that Professor Kumar is asking about?
No, you see what's happening in the rural areas, because people have now access to electricity. Earlier, they didn't have access to electricity. So they are using now electricity and, solar pumps and so many other things, for which they were earlier using tractors. That's one reason. And the second is, of course, as I tried to point out earlier, that, Professor Arun Kumar, these are his subjective, his thesis. I have heard him several times. But the point is that there is no change, because he has his God, and I respect that. He's an economist, he's entitled to his views. But the point is that if you go by his views, then there should have been social rights in this country. There would be social unrest all across the country if you go by his views. If he's really talking about Republic of India, I don't know which country he's talking about. But in India, you see, the point is that, you can draw your own conclusion, fine, and you say that all these agencies draw and depend only on the government data. That is not true. There are a number of other agencies. If PSD, a small chamber, regional chamber, can produce data, and Professor Arun Kumar is willing to buy their data, which means there are agencies 10,000 times bigger than them. I mean, they can't collect their own data? Or you think the economists would go just entirely only on data given by the government of India? Wouldn't they have access to other data? Now, that's point. But you're entitled to your views, but I disagree with you completely.
Okay.
And all I say that it's fine to sit in front of a computer and say everything is wrong, but just a minute, let me conclude. No, listen to me. Listen to me. Listen to me. What I'm saying is the people like me, I'm a politician. I go to Uttar Pradesh and Bihar regularly in the interiors, and I see things with my own eye. I'm referring these two states because where the challenges, economic challenges, social challenges are probably, the highest. So I'm referring to only those two states. And when you go on the ground, you see the change, you see hope, you see development. So what I'm saying is that, but if you have decided everything is wrong because you come on television and you have your own theory, more you say against government, more channels invite you. If that's fine, I respect that. But the point here is that the data, where data have problems.
Mr. Taneja, may I ask you these places that you visited in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, were they prospering because things were going great in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, or because they're all migrated to other cities in other states and that is where they were actually working and earning a livelihood? A lot also depends on that, by the way. And you say there, why aren't there any social riots? May I just remind you, you don't need social riots, but you've had farmers in this country repeatedly come out in streets in thousands and lakhs, take over roads of our cities and protest. You have had farmers in this country who are killing themselves in hundreds in a monthly basis. You've had teachers in this country, in various parts of our country, in various cities, who are protesting for jobs, for formalization, confirmation of jobs. You have various communities and castes coming out and protesting for reservation and jobs quota and education quota. And all of that is happening because we are not able to pull them up. We are not able to give them jobs. We are not able to give them a satisfying progressive life, which is why they are protesting. Now, they may believe if they get a 16% Maratha quota in the state of Maharashtra, all of their other problems will go away. But please don't, let's not deny the pain which is there in this country by saying, why is nobody raising their voice? People are raising their voice. Maybe the politicians are sleeping in the parliament and not listening. Now, that being said, I needed a final response from Dr. Virmani on the technical that's been raised by Professor Kumar.
Dr. Virmani, you have taken 3 minutes and you won't give me a chance to reply.
It wasn't a question.
3 minute address to the nation.
It wasn't a question.
Address to the nation. You're not giving the
because
right
it wasn't
to
a question to you.
No.
These were simple facts.
That give me. You have to allow me to. No. There was a question. There was a question. No, you're not simple facts. What you say is fact because you are the anchor. Just because
it's a simple fact. Can you deny the protest?
Whatever you say doesn't become fact. It was a question. You started with a question to me. You started with a question
what is your response?
About Uttar Pradesh, the places I visited.
Yes.
And you said great. I never used the word great.
Okay.
No. I never used the word great.
Okay.
I never used the word great.
Okay.
All I said that there are many changes.
Okay.
There is hope. I used the word hope. I hope you understand the difference between hope and
Of course,
and,
the response to a debate on economic slowdown is hope.
Okay. Now, yeah. I know you don't like. You can address to the nation. Your address to the nation is fine, but you won't let me speak.
Give your answer, I'm listening.
Okay, address to the nation. Why do you call us? Address. You don't need to call us.
These tactics don't work with me, Mr. Taneja. Please give your answer. Don't waste the time of my viewers.
No.
It's my time.
Okay, all right. You address to the nation, I'll stay
Please give your answer. Everybody is listening.
Let your viewers decide. Let your viewers take, because you only pick up few things. Address to the nation. No, okay, I'm not interested. You please carry on with your address to the nation.
Are you sure? Can I move on? If you don't want to answer, don't complain later.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yes, please move on.
Okay, Dr. Virmani, would you want to respond to what Professor Arun Kumar said?
So let me start with the simplest one, the automobiles. SIAM has data which shows that in 2018-19, there's a growth rate of all automobiles of something like 7%. The only segment out of the 5 that they monitor which slowed down was cars. Okay, it is not true that the commercial vehicles have slowed dramatically or have become negative. The 3-wheelers have not, the 2-wheelers have not. This is in the data, in the SIAM data of production. Second point, I have looked very carefully at all available time series, whether it is rural wages, unemployment, the private sector, as the gentleman from BJP mentioned, you have to look at time series. You know, you can arbitrarily put one data point from this organization, a second data point from that organization, and put it together and say that a lot of things has happened. Now, that may be true, but I'm afraid that is not the way we can operate. The third point, the GDP data, which you seem not to believe, is going to show that the GDP growth has fallen to about 4 to 4.5% in the last quarter. It is showing that. That is a roughly 30 to 40% decline in the GDP growth. That's not good enough for you. I mean, what is it? You want the country to just collapse? I just don't understand. The GDP data is showing that. And look at the IIP data. I looked very carefully at the IIP data for the details, because the quarterly data doesn't show details. It gives you a manufacturing number, it gives you, and so on. You look at the IIP data, it shows that there is a decline in consumer goods, 3 types of consumer goods in this current half year. Okay, it was not there in many of these before, not last year, not for the last 5 years. So the data we have, which is also used by the CSO to calculate GDP, is showing these things. It's not that they don't ignore it. It is quite correct that there was a switch to an MCA database. We have discussed this in a conference, and what the experts have said, who have looked at this data, who worked on it. One of the experts who's been involved in the last 5 years on the statistical database said it won't make a difference of more than 0.2% or 0.3%, this blow-up factor. So, you know, the question is, when you're talking about quantitative numbers, you have to be quantitative.
Okay.
We can't just talk about general things. It is okay. It's okay for the government political party or the opposition to talk in general terms. They are perfectly entitled to do it because that is their job. But when I'm looking at data and I'm discussing data with an economist, one has to be a little more precise.
Okay, fair enough. I take your point. Unfortunately, I've completely run out of time, so I'm going to thank all of our panelists for joining us. Now, the data wars will continue because there is a disagreement between economists. The government itself admits that there is a problem with data collection, and once that happens, and it's very difficult to have a debate on actual concrete numbers, but I will still attempt to do this. In the last 1.5 years, our growth has gone from 8% to now 5% and perhaps even lower. And at the time that our growth was a 5% and 4.5%, we had our ministers telling us that, oh, people are not buying cars because of millennial mindset, that there is no slowdown in this country. Look at the kind of revenues that movies are collecting. The ticket sales are happening for movies. How can there be a slowdown? That flights are full. You can't get a rain ticket. So how can there be a slowdown? It is time for the government to stop issuing these kind of ridiculous denials. This is the graph. It shows you the reality. Even if we don't have to go with those who say the growth is worse than 5%, much lower, like Dr. Arvind Virmani said, it's still 5%. A country like ours, an emerging, developing country the size of ours, cannot afford to grow at such low levels. Just look around you, and I will say it again and again. How many people are finding it easy to switch jobs for a better job, for a better paying job? How many people are actually living in fear today of losing their job? How many people are expecting any kind of raise or appraisal next year? How many new factories are being setting up? How many homes are being sold? How many new projects are getting announced? That is a reflection of the state of economy if the numbers are not credible. There is no debate here. The only question is, how soon can we get out of it? And that question only gets addressed if the government gets serious about just how grave the problem is. Thank you so much for joining us on this debate.